In this video, we're going to tackle a big subject, and that's the subject of using subdivisions, and more specifically the subd modifier. We're not going to go into advanced topics like topology and all of the other things, because that's a topic for another day, but I'm just going to scratch the surface on this. So let's start off by explaining what subdivision actually is as a process within a 3D program. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to create a plane. And we're going to go into edit mode, select face over here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to find the subdivide option over here near the top. And as you can see, it basically split this square into 4 other squares, this polygon into 4 other polygons. So if I increase the subdivision number, it's going to crank out more and more and more polygons. So what would happen if I select everything here, I press right click and subdivide? It's basically going to subdivide each and every one of these squares once again. And that's basically how you get large geometry, which you can use for whatever it is that you want to model. For example, sculpting works that way pretty much. Stuff like ZBrush, sculpting in Blender. Some of the operations there use subdivisions. Having this much geometry allows us to create way more complex shapes than using simple box modeling stuff. However, where this thing becomes actually really powerful is not by manually subdividing, but by using a modifier that actually does this for us. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to add a cube to the scene. And I'm going to select it, go to the modifier tab, and find the subdivision surface modifier, or the subd modifier, which is the way I'm going to refer to it. Now, once I've added this, you can see that it basically, if you look at this, it subdivided the cube, but it also shrunk it. So how does the subd modifier work? Basically, what it does is it creates a subdivision and then smooths out everything. So basically, from a cube, we have a sphere. And if you remember the way things worked a while back with the plane, when I subdivided it, when we do subdivisions, they basically subdivide every single polygon that we have in the scene. So here is where things get interesting. If I go to edit mode right now, you can see that I have the silhouette of the original cube that I had, as well as its geometry. That's because we're using a modifier, and again, it's not applied, so nothing here is permanent still. If I start adding loop cuts, Ctrl and R, you can see that things start to tighten up. And right now, we get essentially a cylinder by adding a couple of loop cuts. If I increase this levels in viewport, you can see that pretty much as it subdivides more and more, it creates an actual cylinder. How does this work? So let me turn this off for you real quick. What happens is we select all of these polygons over here. We right click and subdivide. You can see that it basically creates subdivisions even in the stretched out polygons, like the one here. I'm going to undo this, and I'm going to go back to object mode and apply subdivision modifier. We're going to go back into edit mode here. So basically, when it subdivides this, it keeps the shape close to what it was because there isn't enough surface to actually smooth it out. So if I start adding these in, you can see that we get a nicely polished cube over here. Let's add these as well. And edge loops inserted like this are called control loops. So if we go out of edit mode, you can see that we have this really nice, really polished cube with these really nice edges. So this is a really high geometry dense cube. But what I want to really show you is how you can manipulate this to a point where you can actually create something like really nice. You can start thinking of your forms in terms of subdivision surfaces. So let's edit this cube a bit. Go to edit mode, and I'm going to add an edge loop right here. And I'm going to take this end, and I'm going to move it forward. Something like this. Now let's go back to object mode and add subdivision modifier. Crank it up a bit. And I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to start creating my control loops, the edge loops that we just discussed. So control R, you're gonna tidy up the back. You see how this works, right? This becomes stiffer, more hardened, more tight. We're going to create one up here. We're going to create one down here. And now essentially we have a really smooth surface that I want to leave it like this, like not have it actually be sharp in front. We can also tidy it up a bit more by doing this. And the closer we get to this edge, the sharper this gets. So you might wanna adjust it based on whatever the shape you need to create is. Like just imagine that I want to have it real tight. So basically I'm going to put it over here. But let's imagine that I want to have it real soft. So I put it back and look the difference. You basically need to consider what you actually need when applying this modifier. Now that we have this in place, we can put the sides, and depending on what look you want to achieve, you may want to not put sides in this. So for example, now that I'm looking at it, I really don't feel like putting these sides in, and I feel like having this thing benefits me more because I wanted to have like this nice smooth transition, but I want these to be hard, these walls. So let's go on and make the walls harder. We're not going to be inserting this. We're going to be pushing this forward. And then what we actually want to do is have nice, tight upper and lower corners. So if we go to faces, we can select these. And actually inset them. And you can see the difference. Look at how sharp it's become as compared to those that don't have the inset. So insetting things is also another way to add these loops. So I'm going to create another box. And what we're going to do here is add the Subdivision Surface Modifier, crank it up a bit. Going to go to edit mode, to faces, and I'm basically going to inset just this face. And you can see that inset pretty much creates the effect that we're looking for. If we inset it again, it's going to make it even tighter. That's because essentially we're adding another edge loop. That's what inset does. So that's why it's becoming tighter. Let's look at another option here. Let's go to edges, and let's take these two edges, and let's bevel them. Control B, or bevel from right here. I'm going to use Control B. And if you look at how this form is getting distorted, you can see that it also works on the surface. The closer we have it, the tighter the surface is But let's, for example, scroll with the mouse to add more geometry. You can see how this thing starts to change and create something really interesting in terms of like just an effect. Let's keep it low. One thing you don't want to be having, and I'm going to turn this off for a bit, is angons when working with Subdivision Modifier. Look at these, for example. These are all angons, and if I enable it, you can see that we have artifacts here. The one thing we can do is go to vertices, select one vert, select another, and press J from the keyboard to connect them. So I'm going to do this again. And what would happen if I connect these two? Ooh, it's going to become really sharp. And let's say I don't want this. Let's say that this isn't the effect I'm looking for. So let me connect just these so we can go and do something more interesting with them. Let's say that I want to use my knife tool to cut through on these. And this is things that we've already done, so I'm just going to turn this off. Using the knife tool, I start cutting. I will cut from basically here to the top. From here up. And I'm going to end up connecting these two with J from the keyboard. And once I enable the modifier, you can see how drastically that changed the profile of what we currently have. So right now I can add an edge loop. For example, if I go to edges, press Ctrl and R, I can tidy this up even further. Add one right here. And you can see how this side starts to change dramatically as compared to the other one. Basically, if you tweak your topology, it's going to give you different results. And what you need to figure out is sort of what tweaks you need to have in order to get the results you need. But one thing you really don't want to have when working with subdivisions is angons, because they basically tend to give you artifacts like these. The algorithm really doesn't know how to deal with angons, so the fewer you have of them, the better. And if you ask me, you shouldn't have any at all. So angons aren't really good for doing any sort of production modeling work. So that's it from the basics of using subdivision modeling. Before we go, I just want to give you a quick idea of how you can polish surfaces that are already done. For example, this monkey. If I add the subdivision surface, you're going to see that it becomes way more organic and polished. That's something that can be used in high poly modeling. So keep that in mind. It can also be used simply to add a level of polish, not just for modeling. And with that, I leave you and see you in the next video.